Like, let's say we want to know what the two-addict valuation of square root of 2 is.